Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. Hey, why are people in debt so much? Well, you know, housing is very expensive, and education is very expensive, and healthcare is very expensive because of all the money printing that's being done to help people manage their expenses. What a joke. Hello.
Hey, Maxwell, the theme of this episode is we're a Yankee Doodle dandy because, of course, the Yankees, you know, we were first called that by the Dutch because we ripped off everything and we copied everything. And then we kind of, you know, took it as our own word that we're proud to be Yankees, right? Now we're full circle. According to the second half of in this episode where you interviewed Dan Collins, he raises an interesting situation, which is that he says American 5G is fake, that there's no actual 5G. It's like a Potemkin telecom system. We have a Potemkin economy. We have a Potemkin monetary system. None of it is real. Our dollars are not backed by gold. It's not backed by even productivity or GDP. It's backed by men's with gun, and I suppose that's a bit real. But the fact is that we're just faking it. Like, it's fake goods. We have a fake high tech. And that's harder than like when China rose to power on a lot of fake goods. They had fake, also beef buns, pork buns for sale in Beijing that we've discussed over the years. But when you're doing high tech, it's really much harder to fake it, right? Like, because things go seriously wrong. A lot of high tech is interconnecting various devices around the world. So when you can't, it's hard to fake that.
Yeah, the 5G in the U.S. is fake. Verizon, for example, is advertising they have 5G, but it's available to something on a very spotty basis to maybe a few hundred people, and that's it. But they have this huge national campaign that we're leading in 5G, but it doesn't exist. It's a Potemkin product. It's like an empty box, essentially, but they get away with it because they get the benefit of an open spigot from the Fed, and the executives have their basket out, and they're just taking all that money and you know, their stock options keep going higher, and they're like, well, we must be geniuses because we're getting wealthy. So I guess everything we say, even if it's a lie, is probably a good idea. So that's happening. And you're right, it's all basically fake. And the money printing now has gone hyperbolic to cover up this illusion. And I remember in World War II, America used blow-up tanks, fake tanks, to fool the enemy. Now they're trying to use fake money to fool the world into thinking that there's an economy in the United States, even though there is none.
Because that's the thing, right? And this is a trope of a lot of films or a lot of novels, is that lies beget lies, beget lies, beget lies, and then you forget what was real in the first place because you have to keep on building lies to cover up the previous lie, and then you forget what was real. So I guess really when it started was under Reagan, and deregulation accelerated under Bill Clinton, when we presented a lie to the people of America, especially the Rust Belt, where we said, okay, we're going to send your jobs overseas, but trust us, you're going to get richer as a result. Like, it didn't make any sense. You're not going to have a job, but it'll be better. We promise you. Learn to code. Right? That was the one thing that you were allowed to say back then. You're not allowed to say you learn to code anymore because, you know, it's now journalists and the elite losing jobs. So you're not allowed to tell them to learn to code. But back then you used to just say, learn to code. But that was a lie. That was never the truth. And so what had to step in to cover up that lie was the money printing. So our monetary system became a lie to cover up the lie of not producing any wealth and manufacturing.
It's an easy thing to do to cover up the shortcomings in an economy by extend and pretend, right? So the maturity date on all these corporate bonds gets extended further out. The maturity date on U.S. debt, you know, they try to extend it out. Like Argentina, they introduced a 100-year sovereign bond, right? That's extend and pretend. And that's happening all over the world. And the negative interest rate bubble is now over 19 trillion, approaching 20 trillion. The indebtedness of the globe is 300% of the global GDP, call it roughly $90 trillion. And it's all fueled by this incredible belief, this in fairy dust, in the fiat money. See, it's very condescending to go to an average American worker who takes pride in their work and to say, look, we don't want you to work anymore. We're going to give you funny money, wampum, coupons, the funny money. And that shows that the social contract is completely obliterated because the average person wants to become self-sovereign and work and be productive. They don't want the paper nonsense from the government to come in there. That's a repudiation of the social contract. And that's why we see, I open my Twitter feed, and all I see from coast to coast is protests, and that's all the result of printing too much money. And people are going to, not be happy with this.
We're at the point now, 50 years, we're heading into the 50th birthday of the US dollar, fiat standard around the world. And it makes sense that we would be installing a president who started his political career right then, in 1972, just as, we only came off the US, the gold standard in the end of 1971. So he comes in 1972, he, right at the beginning of 72. So he's there from the beginning, and he doesn't really remember any of it, right? On the one hand, it's a problem if you forget your lies, right? But if you forget them big, if you go big, like Biden can, because of, his situation. So if you go big with forgetting, that's a very American trait. It's a Yankee Doodle dandy way of doing it. You might want to look at the data and the charts. This is a remarkable bit of information here. M1 money supply has increased yet another $210 billion in the week between November 23rd and November 30th, on top of the $500 billion the week prior. That's over $700 billion in just 2 weeks. M1 money supply of the United States has increased by 64.5% since the beginning of 2020. There is no history for this. None. Certainly no history in the United States, perhaps in like Zimbabwe or Venezuela, but not in the United States.
Yeah, it's the Blanche Dubois economy, where America, and you'll have Joe Biden, essentially America's Blanche Dubois, up there in the White House saying, I always rely on the kindness of strangers. As the burp. When the rest of the world's like, basta, no more. Interest rates then skyrocket. Blanche's, well, in this case, not alcohol, but whatever the anti-dementia drug of the choice of the elderly is today, would become more pronounced. And there's it, scene. Thank you, Tennessee Williams.
Of course, our Spanish-speaking audience was loving your Spanish word there, basta. You learned
Basta! I know a Spanish word. Spanish-speaking Keiser Report audience, millions and millions of people. We love you. Mwah! Mwah! Happy Christmas time. We love you.
Right. So that reminds me, we have some Christmas specials coming up, and Christmas and New Year's specials. They're really fun, really good. We're going to take some...
Feliz Navidad.
You see? So he's understanding
Feliz
more and more.
Navidad.
He's picking up the Spanish as we go. Now, in terms of this lie, and we see that in the money printing, so the expansion of M1 money supply by 64.5%. Remember, because as the lies begin to unfold, unravel, and people start to call it out, your lies have to get bigger. And you see this often with well-known con men. They'll do that, like as their con, it's like, hey, you've done this. This car is a jalopy. Oh, no. And they have to come up with a bigger and bigger lie to cover their smaller lies. So the M1 money supply shooting up 64.5% is covering up a huge lie. Part of the lie was exposed by COVID and the fact that everybody is staying at home, and yet apparently like GDP kept going up, stock markets kept going up. So they had to pretend, that, okay, we shut down and nothing changed. It became transparent and obvious to all that it was just China operating the economy in the world. It's never been America. But this is the other side of the money printing, and that is the deflationary black hole of bad debts. Bitcoin rallies above 19,000 again as institutional interest grows as the global volume of negative yielding debt hit fresh all-time highs of 18.4 trillion. Life insurance giant Mass Mutual has announced it has already invested $100 million in Bitcoin for its general fund. He just lays the chart of the volume of negative yielding debt versus the Bitcoin price, and they have started to kind of move together, and that would suggest that there's some linkage between the fear of financial collapse of monetary collapse, which is why people are diving into these negative yielding bonds.
Right. That used to be the chart of gold and debt.
Yes.
Okay, that's been separated because of all the manipulation that Jamie Dimon just copped to recently.
Yes,
But
another
Bitcoin,
lie.
Right, Bitcoin opens it up. And look, here's what we got going here with Bitcoin. It's essentially what George Soros did to the British pound in 1992. It was a speculative attack. He broke the Bank of England. He broke the pound. They made $1 billion over there at Quantum Fund in a matter of hours. So Michael Saylor at MicroStrategy, he's borrowing that playbook. And he realizes, and this is the one thing the Fed was hoping they would never have to deal with, and that would be a dissenting billionaire. They can pour money into the billionaires' pockets with free money and stock buybacks. They can pour money into the mainstream media by buying ads for defense contractors. But if one is a dissenter, like Michael Saylor, and saying, "Basta, I call you out, Fed," and he says, "I'm going to borrow money at your ridiculously cheap rates to buy Bitcoin on my balance sheet and personally," that is he pulled the pin on the grenade into a house of peaches called the global central banking system. And, the next 6 weeks, I think the next 6 weeks, you're going to see interest rates skyrocket, Bitcoin skyrocket. Michael Saylor is going to be outriching Jeff Bezos, and the world will be completely different because a one man stood up, Michael Saylor, to the insanity. Kudos.
Right. Well, Peter Turchin, he's a Soviet-born professor at University of Connecticut, did predict this. He would call Michael Saylor a counter-elite. He predicted 10 years ago that the U.S. would face chaos and crisis in 2020. And the reason he said is that his studies show that there's an overproduction of elites in America. There are too many elite. The elite have too many children, and the elite have too many educated children, and those born with entitlement, and they feel they are owed something, just like the Saudi Arabia has 7,000 princes who deserve a cut of the oil money, and then that started to disappear. So they're floating their Saudi Aramco and trying to find some funds to feed all these 7,000 princes. The same in America. And what he says is where the chaos starts is with the counter elites, because these are elites that start to turn against the other elite as the battle for this big lie. The Potemkin economy starts to disintegrate the whole thing. The mirage disappears.
Right. There's no bubble like an elite bubble because they're so narcissistic that they don't see the bubble. They're the least to see, the last to see the own bubble of the elites. And so when it gets extended like it is now, this house of peaches that's about to explode in everyone's face with Michael Saylor's grenade of buybacks of Bitcoin using government cheap money is something we haven't seen since the Reign of Terror. Quite frankly, in revolutionary France, 40,000 elites were, met their maker as part of the revolution.
Well, now their wealth will be decapitated. Their wealth will be
decapitalized. They'll be decapitalized, not decapitated. That's Michael Saylor way. Decapitalize, don't decapitate. Okay? So don't DM me with your frickin' complaints, Karen. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, I'll be probably a lot richer. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Dan Collins, entrepreneur, who lived in China for 20 years. Now he's back in America. He knows a lot of stuff. We love him. Dan, welcome back.
Hey, Max.
This is interesting. I don't even know if it's true or not. I read this and I'm wondering, what? China has planted a flag on the moon? When did this happen? What should we learn from this? And where is this new space race heading?
This is a very interesting thing. As this whole year we've been all dealing with COVID, things have been moving along. December 5th, I think, is a day that may go down in history. Not only did China plant the flag on the moon, but they did a few other announcements as well. But with the flag on the moon, this was broadcast all over China. The Chang'e 5 lunar mission basically sent a module down to the moon, got some rocks, went back up. But it broadcast all over Chinese state television, the vision of the orbiter ascending from the moon, and in the background's the Chinese flag planted on the moon. And it drives a lot of patriotism all across all across China. They're not stopping here. They've got very ambitious missions for Mars, moon colonies. I mean, they are basically in the ascendance when it comes to space.
When the Soviet Union collapsed, you could argue that so too did America's competitive drive. Remember, Francis Fukuyama wrote an essay called The End of History. And as a result, America became kind of fat and lazy. And we've got that huge diabetes epidemic now. Now, the space program languished without competition. Now China's in the race. And is this going to accelerate America's mojo to get us back doing something interesting other than watching Netflix? And or is SpaceX going to take the whole ball of wax and just take it for all Elon Musk, and he'll become richer than Jack Ma?
Well, yeah, it's a good point. We have languished basically since the collapse of the Soviet Union. You see it everywhere. Sputnik is what originally drove our progress in space. So the competition with China in space, I believe it is there. Unfortunately, you're seeing a lot of U.S. institutions like NASA and military and in general language and not be able to produce much. Take a look at the military side, the F-35. The U.S. spent $1.5 trillion in development, which is basically the GDP of Russia, and it has flown 0 combat missions. Basically can't fly. It can't beat the F-15, which was made in the 80s. This is a general structural decay across the entire U.S. system. NASA is a perfect example. Elon Musk shows up out of nowhere and just drops the cost 90% for space travel. Now they just have to hand him checks, and he just keeps doing amazing stuff with it. Musk himself, SpaceX, is basically outcompeting not only NASA, but China's space program as well by themselves. So America, there are glimmers of hope that if we look at this kind of new pathway forward, maybe we can start to innovate again and get out of it. But we have been languishing for decades here.
Now, here's another headline I'm just reading for the first time, and I don't know what's going on anymore in the world, I guess. China has turned on the nuclear-powered artificial sun. According to press reports, it uses a powerful magnetic field to fuse hot plasma and can reach temperatures of 150 million degrees Celsius, approximately 10 times hotter than the core of the sun. China is racing ahead in the nuclear technology as well. I'm lost, Dan. What's going on?
China, so we talk about December 5th and the moon landing, planting their flag. They also on the same day announced a quantum computer that's 10 billion times faster than Google's quantum computer. They also announced a hypersonic engine in development that could put a commercial aircraft anywhere in the world in 2 hours. This all came on December 5th. The physics reactor you're talking about, and China has some of the best physics people in the world. This is a new fusion capacitor that they've been working on. But if it happened about a week after the moon landing. So if you look at some of the scientific progress that's coming out of China, it's clear that we've been watching their progress the last decade or so. That we're soon, if not already, going to be in the catch-up phase with China in terms of scientific and technical development.
My understanding is that the 5-year periods in which the Chinese leadership get together and they do their 5-year planning, during the last round, they were starting to incorporate AI, artificial intelligence, into their planning and into their management of the country. And when I'm reading down these achievements here, I'm thinking, to what extent is AI powering all of this? Because if AI can tell you how to more efficiently deploy resources, and this is very interesting. Is that already happening, Dan?
It's already happening. China has the world's largest data lakes, which is what AI gets trained on. They have most of the top people in the field believe China's already surpassed the U.S. in artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is going to be like electricity. It's actually going to be everywhere. It could displace up to 40% of jobs. It's going to be incorporated everywhere, along with being carried on the backs of 5G and 6G. Oh, by the way, America, you don't have anybody that can even make 5G equipment. China's already working on 6G. They've rolled out 20 million base stations, this year in 5G. We have what's called fake 5G. It lasts like a few seconds a day, and we call ourselves and we go around pretending we have 5G. So we're falling behind in so many areas. AI is going to be one where they have just so many, AI researchers over there and so much data. We don't even have a super app yet. They have 2 super apps, the WeChat and the Alibaba's interface that everything's linked to it. It's also how they stop COVID. They could basically, you get a message if you've been around anyone who contracted COVID and it's on your phone. You get a red light. So, they're implementing artificial intelligence now across the entire society, which which is way surpassing U.S.
I remember when China was let into the WTO on extremely favorable terms by the Clinton administration, essentially. Joe Biden, who was in Washington at the time, when asked about, well, aren't they going to potentially eat America's lunch with their ability to compete with us? And he said something to the effect of, he laughed hysterically and then talked about they can only make shoes, or he mumbled something. Even then, he didn't have great cognitive abilities. But that looks like prophecy is coming true, that China now is going through this Thucydides trap where they overtake America as the world dominant superpower. America's laughing, and they've elected Joe Biden. The guy who was so wrong about it and had problems back then is now apparently going to be sitting in the White House. And there's a connection with his son and the CCP as a direct conflict of interest, like as in the biggest corruption we've seen in 100 years type level corruption. So again, America appears to be Chinese vassal state. But getting more particular about it, this new nuclear technology, does this make them energy independent as well?
They're working very hard on it. One of their Achilles heel is they are now the world's largest oil importer by far. They have the largest nuclear build out coming. I mean, the number of nuclear power plants under construction, is something maybe 13 to 20 plants under construction. But and that goes back to the whole thing of climate change. If you really want to stop climate change, you're going to need nuclear power. And I think most people realize that you're not going to get CO2 emissions without nuclear power. So they're rapidly building up the space that has military implications as well. You're talking about nuclear powered, not only navies, but also nuclear powered spacecraft, which U.S. has been hesitant to look at, but China won't be afraid to look at that.
I can't believe this show's not dubbed into Chinese. There's like over 1 billion people over there. I'm all for it. Let's do it. I'd like to expand my audience by 10 times as well. Now, looking at potential hotspots of conflict, South China Sea, right? That's always a hotspot zone. You've got Hong Kong has become a very hot zone. Taiwan, a lot of stuff going on there. So, like, if you were to look at the geopolitical map here, where does China, they obviously have expansionist visions here. Where will we see that play out? Like game theory this a little bit. Where are we going to see the dominoes fall as China spreads its wings? I'll put it that way.
You remember back when Biden was vice president, it was all about the Asian pivot, which we were going to move half of our naval and air force resources to Asia Pacific. Never happened because, as you pointed out, Joe Biden, even as of a few months ago, was like saying, come on, man, China's not a competitor to us. He still thinks they're making shoes. These guys out of it. But what happened in that whole time we were talking about an Asian pivot, they built up islands in the South China Sea. They have complete command and control of the South China Sea, the East China Sea. The U.S. will not, it would be crazy to put any naval resources within what they call the first island chain, which Taiwan is a part. China has so many land-based cruise missiles that they could sink an aircraft carrier in minutes. There's the DF-41. They have their smart, land-based cruise missiles. So that they started with their anti-access capabilities, what China did, which basically means nobody can land people or ships in China. Now we woke up this year and go, whoa, China just expanded their Navy by 50%. The Chinese Navy is now 25% larger than the United States Navy. So a lot of that's now becoming blue water navies. They're going to expand their reach. They're building out bases, a string of pearls, it's called, all across to get them access to Middle East oil. We've talked up on the show before about Pakistan. They're literally sending 500,000 Chinese immigrants into Pakistan to build out a whole province there, which sits at the mouth of on the Red Sea to watch all these oil imports come through. So they have no choice. They're so dominating in terms of commodities, all commodities, including oil and ore. Everything has to get imported while manufactured items get exported. They will control the space, and they're going to have to go global and expand.
So let me ask you this. We recently had Kyle Bass on the show, and I would say he's a China bear. And he points to the debt. He says the debt's overwhelming. It's unsustainable. They've got a huge debt problem. All this rah China stuff is malarkey, to use Joe Biden's word. And what do you think about that? He's
one of these China bears who've been around for 20 years talking about the end of China and the property market's going to collapse. And they just get wrong and time again. Bass, before he was on China, he was talking about the Japanese currency melting down and lost a lot of money on that. So, I mean, it's just, he shorted the Chinese yuan probably 7 years ago now, and it's been wrong. China, the renminbi is just getting stronger this year. So these guys have kind of an agenda and they do a disservice to the United States because they put everybody to sleep. A lot of these guys don't want to deal with China because it's too complicated. They don't understand it. They don't speak the language. They've never been there. If they've ever been there, they've been there once, yet they claim they're a China expert, So it's pretty comical. Imagine somebody sitting in China and they're an expert on US, but they don't speak English and they've never been to the country. Would you consider them an expert on American culture or foreign policy? You really wouldn't. So a lot of these guys you have to take with a grain of salt. They've been guys like Gordon Chang. They've been around for decades, and they've been wrong for decades. And there's somehow people still listen to them. I don't get it.
There's a little bit of jingoism there that doesn't seem to add up. All right, Dan Collins, thanks so much for being on Keiser Report.
Thanks very much.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank our guest, Dan Collins. If you want to get in touch with us, please do. However you do it. Until next time, bye, y'all.